a lot of people are backing away from talking about climate change right now, partly because as we see, the top issues for people move around a little, environment has slid down the list a bit. As affordability has become, at crisis levels, as healthcare has become at crisis levels, some other crises have fallen down the list a little bit. But you have decided as part of your three planks of your campaign to make environment the focus of one of those. And I will say, I think that this has defined you as a candidate because I don't think any of your competitors are really leaning into an environmental argument. So maybe just talk about that, why you chose environment, and then we can sort of jump into what your plan to tackle climate change is.
Thank you. As you probably know, I've door knocked hundreds of thousands of doors in this province, both when I ran for the school board and owned that I was a New Democrat, and then as a New Democrat, and as a volunteer on other NDP campaigns. And I will say that every day during the 2023 campaign, somebody brought up the impacts of climate change. They don't always lead with the words climate change, but I was door knocking in May, and kids couldn't play outside because the air quality was too bad to let them go out for recess. And parents were bringing this up every day. When I spent time in northwestern Alberta in particular, people were talking about the go bags they had ready and the fact that they were having to flee their communities, with very little notice. And what do you put in your go bag? In southeastern Alberta, I spent a lot of time in Medicine Hat. People are talking about catastrophic drought and the fact that their agricultural practices aren't sustainable in the way that they've been in the past because we're so short of water. People are talking about the impacts of climate change, and I know that there were 1,300 votes to be found if we would have offered some real solutions and hope on climate change. I also know that there's a ton of economic opportunity as well. When I launched my climate pillar, one of the pieces included is a Youth Climate Corps, which is an opportunity for young people to take climate change into their own hands, have great jobs, doing things like becoming operating engineers, installing wind turbines, or building berms, operating heavy equipment. There's lots of great jobs, and other jurisdictions are doing this. We're already looking at Biden-Harris south of the border, launching something very similar, and I expect other provinces will be doing the same too, because young people in particular want to take some ownership over this. There's opportunities to have great careers, mortgage paying jobs, and fight climate change by water smarting and fire smarting municipalities. There's lots that we can do to put this in our own control. And I think that most Albertans want solutions. They don't want excuses.
So
And
would
on
you?
that note, sorry, I just want to follow up
No,
on
go
that
ahead.
note
I
because
I asked like four questions, so go.
it's like I think it's really easy, and I get a little frustrated by this to say we need to take action on climate change and let that stand as your commitment to members or to voters or what, depending on the campaign that you're in. And to me, we need to fight climate change. Just that's there's not enough there.
Yeah.
So, you've made a point of really sort of fleshing this out. So maybe just take us through how, if you're the leader of the NDP or if you're the Premier of Alberta, how do we fight climate change? And does the carbon tax play a role in that?
Absolutely does. And I was around the table with you, Cheryl, when we landed on the climate leadership plan. And I'll say that the methane reductions absolutely work. Danielle Smith's traveling the world, taking credit for them. Bravo. The phase out of coal has also worked. We don't see anybody saying we need to bring back coal-fired electricity. We know that the tier model has worked. We've seen lots of revenue generated and some investment in technologies to help reduce emissions. But the consumer-based carbon tax has not worked. It hasn't reduced emissions. It hasn't made people's bills cheaper. And when the federal government took it over, and then they decided to exempt the East Coast from having to pay it for their home heating fuels, they completely undermined confidence in it and broke the system. So I've moved beyond the consumer-based carbon tax, and I believe that cap and trade is the best model for us to be able to hold large emitters responsible, make sure that the public money that we have is invested in making life more affordable for people in the public and reducing their emissions. One of the big reasons why we haven't seen big uptake in EVs is because it's still so incredibly expensive. And in fact, in this last budget, a new tax was added, $200 a year for having an EV, as opposed to other jurisdictions that have seen lots of moving towards EVs have invested in rebates up front. So making it cheaper for you to buy one, which also reduces your bills down the road and reduces emissions. So it's, win-win-win if we actually put that investment, that public money, into reducing emissions for members of the public.
So I think like that all sounds great. First on the EV tax, I mean, they're not really paying the same tax other people that are using roads are currently paying. So, and they've also proven that they go through tires faster. I don't know if I agree with you the EV tax not making it affordable. It's 200 when an EV costs like 60,000. But when it comes to like this carbon tax, you have close allegiance to Rachel Notley. There was the the Trudeau Notley alliance. Where are you going to sit with like this federal carbon tax? And would you, or would you put one in place in Alberta should you become premier?
No, I want cap and trade. I think that makes so much more sense, and I think we can meet our national and international obligations under a cap and trade model and show leadership without tying ourselves to, a model that's been broken by the federal government. I believe that Albertans want to take leadership on this, and we should do it as Albertans. We don't need to lean on somebody else. We have lots of expertise here. I've done lots of consultation. I'm really proud of the plan that we came up with. And yeah, no, I'm not keen on carrying water for the federal government in this. I want to make sure that we get water to municipalities that need it. That's my goal. And industry's been very successful pulling carbon out of the earth. They can also pull it out of the atmosphere, and we can hold them accountable for that.
And how are you going to do that? You talked about like balancing that and affordability. Again, like I said, it sounds good, but what are the tangible things that you would do to balance that beyond, like you said, using public money to support? But if there is no public money, how do you do that without running a huge deficit like we saw last time?
Well, there is public money because I'm going to hold polluters responsible if they don't meet their cap and trade obligations. Then they pay the tax, right? And then that money that comes in is public money. So then we can use that to reduce consumers' bills. We can use it to put solar on every home that wants it. We can get rid of here's another thing. For people who are all big fans of the free market, there is a cap on how much solar you can put on your home, and it's tied to how much energy you use right now. That's ridiculous. If people want to put more modules on their roof and feed more into the system, why wouldn't we allow that for their farm or for their house? So there's lots of ways that we can incent through upfront grants, people reducing their emissions and putting more energy on the grid. And we're going to hold the polluter pay principle as a very high priority for me. And if you're not meeting your obligations and reducing emissions and you're paying into that large industrial emitter rate, then that money should be used to help regular people reduce their bills. We shouldn't be focusing all of that money on giving it back to industry. We should be focusing on, okay, these are your obligations, meet those reductions. And if you don't, you will pay that tax, and then that tax will be used to help the rest of us reduce our emissions.